This is self-inflicted pain on millions of people. It's unnecessary. And now to go right to the brink of a government default, which is catastrophic to our country, to our economy, and to the people in this great country. How they can let that happen is beyond me.
Republicans started off in a place that was an overreach. And to try to change a law that was central to the president's, agenda was not something that was achievable.
Deliver us from the hypocrisy of attempting to sound reasonable while being unreasonable.
He's made himself
Yes. Well, there is just a sample of some of the sound from Democrats, Republicans, and even people of the collar here, all sounding off on a deadline that is fast approaching. I will bring our panel on this. Richard Brodsky, who couldn't keep his voice to himself here, former New York State Assemblyman, senior fellow at Devos, professor at NYU.
Good chaplain.
Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. Nan Hayworth, former Republican congresswoman from New York's Hudson Valley, and maybe again, and senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman, who we've already met. All right. We played the sound off the top, guys. There seems to be cautious optimism. We heard that from both Reid and McConnell. But again, that's the Senate. It might not be the House. Do you share the same optimism that we saw, I guess, on Wall Street today, where I would have bet anybody good money that at the closing bell we would be down 300-400 points?
When you're dealing with people going around saying, one false move and I'd pull the trigger, then optimism is not to be lightly assumed. The truly self-destructive behaviors that have gotten us to this place are still in evidence, and whether the Senate can bail the House out, I don't know.
What do you think?
I have to agree with Mr. Brodsky. I'm not too optimistic. One, let's just say that Reid and McConnell, they work a deal. What is Boehner going to do? Is he going to let the House vote on it, number one? And two, what are the Tea Party Republican conservatives going to do?
Segue, Congresswoman, as we understand it, the deal that's being worked out in the Senate, and all the details haven't been made available, but the idea is that there'd be a January and a February date for the government that would stay open till then, and then the debt limit would be re-examined at that point. The gives from both sides would be the Democrats also want the sequester cuts to end right now, and then that funding to go back into place immediately. On the Republican side, the medical debt, the medical device tax, they want either that or the employer mandate.
The individual
mandates, thank you. It goes to the House. Let's say they work something out. They seem to be near a finish line in the Senate on this. They wouldn't have said, Boehner's been involved in all the negotiations. Does he have an escape hatch to say, you know what, if at this point the Senate gives us something and the Tea Party folks won't go along, I can put it up for a clean vote and I've done my part. Can he do that at this point? Can he get that up on the floor?
I think he can we all know that the clock is ticking, and there has to be an acceptance of responsibility and a common sense view. When I was in the House 2 summers ago when we had the debt limit debate, I brought in experts to explain objectively to the House Republican conference colleagues, look, you don't play around with the debt ceiling increase, and it doesn't mean we're increasing the debt. Folks on the right need to understand it doesn't mean that is authorization to increase the debt. It is being responsible for paying what's already been incurred. And on the left, there also has to be an understanding that when we say, yes, we will increase the debt ceiling, that is not licensed then to continue spending irresponsibly.
And I want to come to some of the strategy, because I think the dates of February and January are in play. I think they carry important consequences in a midterm year. But take me behind the door here. Yeah. You're having these conversations 2 years ago. It's probably some of the same kind of conversations now.
I'm sure it is.
It seems that the Speaker at this point is saying, guys, there's no more wiggle room. Look at the polls. We're getting crushed by every metric alive. He seems that he can either bring it up for a clean vote if they won't go along, or secondly, if enough Republicans, the moderates that are there, they only need 17. Apparently, by this count, they got 25. If they say, the Speaker doesn't even have to call for it. We can now vote or sign on to, I guess, this petition, and then it can come up for a vote. There are 2 other escape hatches here if the Tea Party won't give its blessing, right?
Right. Well, it's a matter of letting everybody understand that we all win when the federal government, the affairs of the United States, can continue with no disruption.
That is not the view of the majority of the Republican conference. This was about Obamacare until 20 minutes ago. All of a sudden, we're talking big spending deals. Fine and dandy. But the fact of the matter is, we got here because there was a linkage made between raising the debt ceiling and repealing a law.
But they capitulated on that.
Who's
There is-
they?
You don't hear any more.
We're
What's
not
the
listening to
debate now?
this. It depends on who you listen to. You listen to Harry Reid, you listen to Mitch McConnell, you listen to Bob
I'm
Corker.
even Boehner. Boehner's not talking
Assemblyman-
about Obamacare anymore. Now
None
he's
of the-
talking about that he wants to have huge entitlement reform. Okay?
He doesn't speak for his conference anymore. That's the lesson.
Maybe that's a fair
But
point.
Assemblyman, but again, it is trying. Both sides are endeavoring or need to endeavor to understand what this all means. You know, we have a responsibility to cover the debt of the United States, whether people
You
like
think
it or
the
not.
Democrats need to be reminded of that?
I think everybody involved in this process, Democrats and Republicans, have to understand what this all means.
Richard, I think
And
the polls
there
have already
has
spoken
been, right.
very clearly. Republicans know. I mean, Lindsey Graham said it bad.
That's not-
Lindsey Graham said, listen,
You're-
we're getting
you're
killed.
cherry picking. There are Republicans who say that, and there are Republicans who don't. There are Republicans who have fallen silent, Republicans who have talked about abortion and Obamacare as the key elements here. There's no Republicans to deal with. There are 16 tribes warring with each other.
But here's the point. I'm sorry, just on the math front, Andrew, you don't need 200 of them. You need 17 of them to at least avert the cliff. Then we'll get into the bigger picture conversations. I don't necessarily disagree with your math. I'm saying the right number is 17.
I think that's the correct number mathematically, but when in this process have those 17 peeled off at any point, and what makes anybody think that those 17
Thursday.
will peel off
Thursday.
now? What-
Thursday.
Yeah, it's,
The threat of the debt limit?
Well, it's
which-
not a threat. It's a real thing.
No, which several members, up to 80 members of that caucus, have been saying really not a big deal, and really the date is November 1st, which we've been hearing for the last
Absolutely
couple of
right.
weeks.
Everything
it's
you
garbage,
say, but it's 17.
Right.
You know some of these 17 by name. You've been in the
Right,
room
I know.
between them. I mean,
You-
Peter King's one of them.
Well, you have a commitment from 17. Bring in the cameras.
Apparently, there's 24 or
Richard,
25.
I would submit to you, people will act responsibly as this deadline approaches. There will be
There'll be
an
17
understanding and acceptance.
Responsible people.
I'm going to anticipate that,
17 out of
that
230
a vote
isn't
will
bad.
occur in the House that will allow the United States to continue to carry its debts. One thing I would add, it would be very helpful from both sides of the aisle if when we come to, and we will, when we come to that point, there's no gloating. There's no, you caved. There's no accusation.
That'll be our job in the media. Congresswoman. That's-
If you
because
guys
I
will
think
act
part of the-
rationally, I promise not to gloat about
But,
it.
you know, the environment should be one where we do cooperate, where we do
But I
try to
think that might be-
understand the concerns of both sides.
I think that might be part of the problem here, Congresswoman, and I think that you might be seeing entrenched Democrats who are going to hold together on this and hold the White House, their feet to the fire on this, because there's a sense of needing to break the fever. And that this constant going from crisis to crisis and negotiating these issues with the gun to the head, or as the
Andrew, if I
metaphor
could jump
goes,
in, not even
can't be
to
allowed
take,
to continue.
To take Andrew's analogy, isn't the person who wants to break the fever more than anyone in Washington John Boehner?
I'm sure.
No, really. I mean, he doesn't want to live this way anymore, right?
For all the right reasons. For all the right reasons, we need a sensible, respectful process from both sides. And
So
it's
no
not
more birther stuff?
impossible to envision.
No more birther stuff? No more he's a
Richard,
Muslim?
let's concentrate.
I-
I would agree with you. All of what we should concentrate on, and speaking
Okay.
from
I
that-
promise not to call him born in Kenya, and I promise not to call him a Muslim.
well,
To
we
me, though,
should
it's a bigger issue,
concentrate on
Andrew.
the
I
real
just want to stay
problems
away
we
from the
have.
clip. For me, the whole thing is Thursday because I find it fascinating and I think really revealing that you had to bring in people, and good for you, to sit down with some folks and say, this is not a game here. If you go over the debt limit, it's not just that you're not making good on the full faith and credit, and not even explaining to them that it's not borrowing more money. It's just, but what happens to the markets? I know when I hear these people, Congresswoman, talking about, well, it's not really the 17th, it's the 23rd, it's the 24th, or maybe.
Right.
Like, are you insane? Do you think the markets are going to wait here for this distinction? They're going to speak with their feet. It's going to hurt everybody's adjustable rate
It's an
interest rates. It's
exponential
going
effect.
to impact here every credit rate.
You really think they're crazy? I don't think they're crazy.
No. I think there are some, and I had an interview with one on Friday, who firmly believes, deep in her soul, that the American public is with her. She gave me this analogy. I swear to
I
God.
don't
She
think
goes, you know what? I looked at the phone calls coming into my office. They want us to double down. I looked, you were there. I looked
the
at them.
issue isn't
Who am I
whether
talking
she's
to?
right, but you said they were crazy. These are people with an ideological point of view. They were elected to
do exactly that.
what they're doing. And when you let them off the hook when you describe them as crazy,
but
they're not.
Sullivan-
They're calculated.
The more, and that's exactly what I did in the summer of 2011. Just respectfully, objectively, factually, sensibly laid out the case. Look, here's what happens.
They forgot, after
They did.
They forgot.
But here's my big final question, Andrew. Let's say for conversation, and you kept stressing today, don't fixate on what they say, because who knows if they can deliver. Hypothetically, this January-February deal happens. Magically, it's falling in the middle of midterms. Now, what does everybody in Washington want to do? They want to keep their job, okay? John Boehner, as much as he hates it, doesn't want to go back to being the minority in the House again, and you would think certainly on the Democratic side they'd want to be in the majority. All that said as a backdrop, and I know we're heavy, I believe January and February is going to be a different reality check for them than now, because they can read polls. They know how badly it got beat.
don't
And I think the
care.
moderates, here's my point. The Tea Party doesn't care. They have the safest seats going. The moderates are going to say to themselves, any Northeast Republican, wait a minute, is going to say, you think I'm going to lose my job
But they're
over
not
this?
empowered.
Do you
They're not
think they're
empowered.
going to run the House of Representatives with 200 Democrats and 17
I
Republicans?
don't think we're going to go through the
Not gonna
stupidity of
happen.
September in December or January.
You're an optimist, and
I
bless
am.
you for
No,
that.
Richard, I think your optimism is
Too
well
optimistic.
But they
placed.
have to
I'm
speak
with
up,
Richard
though.
on this
Yes.
one.
My
I
only
agree.
point is, if you were back there in Congress, what we saw for the last 6 months, and John Boehner, as much as I sympathize with him, he's been too silent. He needs to speak up and say, take my job if you're going to take my job. I don't want to live this way anymore.
When I was there, we had voices in the majority, not only mine, but there were several others who were with me who are not currently there.
17
and
out of
we were able,
235? We
Assemblyman and
can't
I'm
find
talking about
17?
respect, remember? We had a strong ability to put that kind of rational thinking into the process and back up others who
But when
could come
Peter King
around to our
came out,
point of view.
who you know from the New York delegation, Peter King came out and said, who's with me? He turned around, nobody stood with him, okay? And my point is, if he says that again, I hope more people will stand up with him and say, you're right, this is crazy. This is not who the GOP, the Grand Old Party, is. We're not being run by the likes here of the Ted Cruzes. The party's better than that. Okay, now, when we come back, everybody, we will pivot here to an election day fast approaching the next year's midterms. We're talking about two big races in our region. Cory Booker, this Wednesday, we'll find out whether or not he'll be going to the U.S. Senate, or could there be a huge surprise with Mr. Lonegan going instead. We'll get a Garden State update. And later, can you call yourself patriots when you bring a Confederate flag to the nation's capital? And will anyone ever stand up to these guys? We'll talk more about that after this.